What does planning mean? Planning is a scheme or method of acting, doing, proceeding, making, etc. that's developed in advance. The goal of planning is to align decisions with current business opportunities, the available technology, and the company's resources and strengths. It's the university-owned public access channel that has a fleet of eager students using the latest high-def studio equipment to produce a weekly newscast that covers an underrepresented population. It's the production house with a veteran film editor bringing in the latest graphics and stop-motion animation. Media companies base future plans on their mission statements. If the mission is to provide local news, the plans will revolve around how and what to cover and over what locale. If it is to offer media planning services to healthcare providers, then planning probably will entail recruiting staff who are PR and healthcare knowledgeable. I hope you, as a budding media manager, are catching the theme that your people are important. Therefore, you need to include people from all organizational levels in the planning process if you want to succeed. Of course, your planning must include well-defined, measurable goals. To say your plan is to sell a lot of books is vague and subjective. A goal of selling 50,000 copies in the first 3 months is specific, well-defined, and measurable. If the goal is not defined, how will you develop a plan to achieve it? If it is not measurable, how will you know if you have accomplished it? Planning may take short-run, intermediate, or strategic forms. A strategic plan is established. The intermediate plan involves the general ways in which the organization pursues the strategic plan, and the short run is just that. On the next several slides, we'll discuss each. Strategic planning determines where the organization is going over the next year or more. It is concerned with the organization's long-term goals, anywhere from 1 to 10 years. This is where you consider your organization's vision. This is where you establish your mission, and you determine how to assess if you are on task. All strategic plans must include a strategic analysis of the organization's environment, exterior forces, and its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, or SWOT. You'll also want to consider strategic direction, including goals. This includes identifying potential goals, selecting the ones you are going to pursue, prioritizing which goals are most important, and operationalizing measures. You may also want to identify alternative approaches for obtaining goals, considering the most efficient and effective means of reaching goals. Action planning or tactics, including budgets, is also included in strategic planning. This is how you actually plan to achieve the goals. If the goal is to be the top-ranked newscast in the city, what steps are you going to take to get there? Of course, an idea of how you are going to implement the plan must be addressed, as is a plan for monitoring of operations and evaluating and adjusting as necessary if you stray off course. Or, better yet, if you achieve the goal early, how do you adjust your plan to either maintain or set a new goal? Intermediate planning generally covers 6 to 24 months as you get your product or plan up and running. The idea is to keep your organization focused on its long-term goals and on achieving its mission. If the goal is to expand readership by 15%, how is that going to happen? You're going to have a plan that most likely will, or should, include market research and then an idea of what to do with the findings. You may need to reorganize, retrain, or redesign. You also are going to have to consider the budget you have for implementing this plan. You may have to do some reallocations of funds. And of course, you're going to have to plan for how to utilize your human capital, your employees. One focus of the intermediate planning is the marketing plan, which analyzes the 4 P's: product, place, price, and promotion. Product obviously considers the product to be sold, whether that is a film, a magazine, or a new widget. It is everything related to the product: the quality, design, branding, warranties, features, etc. Place relates to your distribution channels, your inventory, and the locations at which you will sell your product. Price consists not only of determining the expense incurred in creating the product and the amount of income you desire to offset the cost and still make money, it also considers at what price you'll be able to sell the product. Finally, promotion relates to advertising and public relations. If you are a book publisher, you certainly will want to book a tour and perhaps see if you can land on the talk show circuit. Filmmakers have screenings. New television shows seek strategic times to run promos and whet the audience's appetite. All must be considered. Keep in mind, at the heart of this marketing mix is the target audience, its wants and needs, and its willingness to buy. Another part of your intermediate planning is the product life cycle. Television shows don't go on forever. Newspapers don't keep with the same layout and design. Cars don't keep the same shape and style. You're going to have a plan for the infancy of your product and how you will get the word out to the growth, the approaching maturity when you are going to want to be planning for the next product, the maturity, and ultimately the decline. And one more area to consider, of course, is human relations. Remember, you are managing resources, including your people. All the things you see listed here must be considered. If your staff is too small, if it does not have the right equipment or training, if you don't have good relations with your employees, if you cannot lead and motivate them, I don't care how great and how well priced your product is, it's doomed. Finally, short-run planning involves a few weeks up to a year. It aids in the assessment of the intermediate and strategic plans. This is the day-to-day and month-to-month operations that help you achieve your ultimate goal. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about international planning. In an earlier chapter, we addressed global media. If you're going to dip your foot in this pool, it's a good idea to plan for it. Organizations must develop a centralized global strategy with various aspects of operations decentralized as economics and effectiveness dictate. Consider these 4 contributing factors as you develop your international plan. Because communication technologies are increasing, as is the growth of the global economy, and because trade barriers are being reduced, a more global media now exists. And because partnerships with foreign media companies are on the rise, communication is more efficient across borders today than ever before. But again, you must keep an eye on external forces and government power plays. These are things beyond your control that can affect these contributing factors in a negative way. It is difficult, and it will take experience and no small amount of trial and error, but to be successful as a global media manager, you must be able to anticipate challenges. Again, part of this comes from planning. As Benjamin Franklin said, failing to plan is planning to fail. Learn to develop contingency plans. Don't get so bogged down in the what-ifs you become paralyzed and fear to move, but do prepare for unforeseen problems, in part by looking at history, and you'll be better prepared to adapt when necessary. You also need to be able to plan for success. How will you handle it? Will you be content? Will you learn from your successes, study why you succeeded, and seek to capitalize? Don't let your successes be mistakes. Make them into habits. Media companies struggle with balance all the time. On the one hand, you have your domestic audience and market. On the other hand, you have your global market. It would be easy to focus on the global because, let's face it, it comes with some unique challenges that may monopolize your time. But if we fail on the domestic side, it may not matter what we do globally. Let me put it this way. Most U.S. companies that operate globally started domestically. Keep in mind that growth does not just come from gaining new businesses or new audiences. It also comes from retaining the audience we currently have. If you neglect that audience, there is a good chance you're sunk. On the international level, strategic planning challenges include these 4 points. It is difficult to analyze the international business environment because you have to consider local economies and the past performance of the company, not only in the current market, but in other global markets as well. Sometimes you're going to be forced to compare apples to oranges and still make sound decisions. Regulatory restrictions, including media content and copyrights, are also different in the global market. Remember the map I showed you about varying levels of press freedom? You'll have to consider that. Of course, education levels of your new audience, along with cultural and language barriers, must be weighed, measured, and overcome. And finally, you must consider if you are going to take in your current media product, acquire an existing media product on foreign soil, or if you're going to adapt what you have to your new audience. Remember, intermediate planning is intended to help us stay on course with our long-term goals, our strategic planning. Well, functioning on the international level is bloody expensive. Never mind the cost of opening new plants, factories, or offices on the global front, you also have to get there. And, sadly in our estimation, some cultures thrive on bribes and under-the-table deals. Remember our discussion on ethics? Now's the time for you to weigh if it is worth it. And how are you going to assess your success? Your goal may have been to corner a market and become the top producer. But if you do that, but don't make the profit margin you had established, is that a success? And if you do everything right, but because of the cultural barriers, you still didn't meet your goal, can you count that a success? I've said this before, but take a look at the movie $1 Million Arm. The main character had a goal in mind. He fell short of that goal, but his investor still re-signed for a longer commitment because his goal was achieved. Great movie, and a great example of the challenges of international assessment. I've said this before. A strong argument could be made that most humans are ethnocentric. They believe their culture is the right one and everyone else is wrong. So, Herein lies a challenge. Do you send your ethnocentric managers, who know the company, how it functions, and what its goals are overseas, to man operations on foreign soils? Or do you hire polycentric managers, those who are rooted in the foreign soil and know the culture, but are going to have to become familiar with your company? Again, for the umpteenth time this semester, weigh the risk versus the reward. Here is one way to solve the problem. In my opinion, this makes the most sense. Adapt your strategy. In preparing to make this jump, stress that it is human nature to be ethnocentric. It's all we really know, right? But emphasize the differences in our culture and the culture wherever it is you are going to with your people, and then adapt the product to the culture. The bottom line, plan, plan, plan. This is going to take time, and oftentimes is going to be frustrating and mind-numbing, but it is going to save you money and stress in the long run.